Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm. I'm your host, Andy Bernstein. This is a great time of year, folks, with the NBA and NHL playoffs getting started. So it's very timely to have this week's guest on the podcast. Nick Nickson has been a broadcaster for the LA Kings for 44 seasons, and he will be stepping away from the mic whenever the current Kings season ends. All of us would love to see Nick leave the booth with a third Stanley Cup ring. I've known Nick my entire career. In addition to our mutual work with the Kings, Nick was also the PA announcer for the Dodgers from 1983 to 1988 when I was their team photographer. So great to catch up and chat with Nick on this episode. He's seen so much Kings and NHL history over his 44-year Hall of Fame career. We talk about some of those moments, including, of course, the two amazing Stanley Cup championships in 2012 and 2014. Nick is mentioned in the same breath as the other great voices in LA sports history: Chick Hearn, Vin Scully, Jaime Jarrín, Ralph Lawler, and, of course, his longtime partner, Bob Miller. Nick has always been a friendly face whenever our paths would cross in the press room or during games. I'm happy to bring this conversation to all of you and celebrate a truly wonderful person and a historic career. Enjoy this episode with the legendary Nick Nickson, and as always, I'll see you on the backside. Officially welcoming my friend and longtime colleague, Nick Nickson, to the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm. Nick, got a lot to talk about, but first and foremost, I have to congratulate you. You're walking away from the mic, man, after 44 years. How does that feel?
Well, it feels okay.
Yeah.
It's been on my radar, retirement, for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my 44th season with the Kings, 50th doing pro hockey. I was very fortunate. Pretty much within a year after I graduated from college, I got my first American Hockey League job with the Rochester Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really all I've done, talk fast,
Yeah.
and year after year after year. But
Yeah.
no, a couple of years ago, I was thinking about retirement, and then the Kings made a couple of changes on radio and TV,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked me to move over from the radio side to the TV side, and I said, "Yeah, okay,"
Mm-hmm.
but I really want to do only one more year. And Luke Robitaille said, "Can you do two more?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do two more."
He's very
So
persuasive. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So yeah, it's been thinking about it. I'm good with my decision. I'm looking forward to the next chapter in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kids, grandkids all live near us here in Santa Clarita,
Mm.
and spending more time with them. Hopefully, work on my golf game and
Yeah.
still go see Kings games.
Well, you and I are kindred spirits, my friend, because I think right? I think I told you that I retired from the NBA court after last season. That was my 43rd year. It takes a toll on you. I mean, especially sitting on the floor and I'm schlepping equipment. And I know I'm preaching to the choir about, game days and travel and all that stuff and missing a lot of kids' stuff over the years. And it's been a full year. I mean, full season. This is the first NBA playoffs that I've missed in 44 seasons. So it's just, it's a weird kind of netherland of like I'm at peace with it, but yet it's all I knew for all that time.
Right, right. Well, a year from now, I'll be in the situation you're in right now.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I'll be putting on the headset and doing a podcast with Andy Bernstein a year from
How
now.
fun would Hey, listen, man, how fun would that be? That would be great. We've
Yeah,
talked
yeah.
about branching out the Legends of Sport podcast, and you certainly have the pipes for it, so let's do it, man.
Yeah. Keep me in mind.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Nick, I didn't realize one thing about you, that you were the Dodgers PA announcer from when 83 to 88. Was that correct? Was that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe 89, 90 was my
Okay.
last year.
Yeah.
Because in 1990, I started doing the Kings
Mm-hmm.
radio play-by-play after working with Bob Miller on the simulcast for 9 seasons.
Right, right.
But yeah, I was there. It's interesting because my first year in LA with the Kings, that following summer, I'd listen and watch the Dodger games.
Yeah.
And I heard that John Ramsey, their longtime PA announcer, was going to retire.
Mm,
And then the Kings season ended the following year,
yeah.
right around this time, right? early April,
Right.
which is when baseball starts. And I'll call the Dodgers. I'm sure they've got someone picked out to do the PA. And
Mhm.
I was like 3 days before opening day, and I called and I said, "Hi, I'm Nick Nickson. I'm with the LA Kings. The position is probably filled, but if not, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring." And
Yeah.
they said, "Oh, okay, okay." And I came down the day before opening night and read some lineups on the PA in an empty stadium, and they hired me to do it. So
Yeah.
it was kind of right place at the right time.
Oh, that's crazy. I was with the Dodgers from '84 to '95, so we crossed paths there too.
Sure.
And
I remember it well.
of
I
course,
remember it well.
yeah, across
Yeah.
the great '88 season, and being part of that was unbelievable. So I'm glad you touched on your Rochester roots, because we always like to go back to how somebody started, who influenced you. You had somebody living in your house who like had an incredible career, right? Behind the mic, he was a DJ. I'm talking about your dad.
Yeah.
He was a
Yeah.
DJ. He was I guess, a radio executive, right, in Rochester.
Yeah.
And you would hang out with him. Like, is that where the bug started, Nick?
Yeah. My dad was also, when he was a disc jockey, when I was really young, and into my early teens, he was also the program director.
Ah,
And every week, every Thursday night, he'd come home with his legal pad, and he'd have to rank the songs that were the most popular for that week.
yeah.
And I'd sit down with him, and he'd ask me a question. All right, what do you think about this song? What do you think about that? And I'd tell him my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not he used it, I don't know. But that's one of my first memories of my dad and his responsibilities as the program director.
Hmm.
And as I got older, and after high school, after school was done, I'd take the bus downtown to the radio station. I'd watch not only him, he had retired in '67, so I watched the other disc jockeys from outside the glass window, and kind of how it all worked. And okay,
Yeah.
how does this go here? Oh, all right, I get it now. I get it. So yeah,
Hmm.
I grew up in that atmosphere, in that
Yeah.
environment. And so when I went to college, it wasn't really until my junior year that I really decided, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on.
Mhm.
And I was very fortunate because at Ithaca College, we had 2 radio stations, an AM and an FM, and they were run exclusively by students.
Hmm.
So, Andy, I had on-air experience my freshman year
Yeah.
when I wasn't even 18 years old yet.
Yeah.
And that experience is huge, as anybody knows, in any walk of life, in any profession. You have to start with the experience. You have to have the reps, the games for a broadcaster in any sport. That's how you get your own style. That's how you become, halfway good, hopefully, at what you want to do. So, yeah, I grew up in the environment, had great opportunities to get experience at college. And then within a year after graduating, I was a disc jockey in Rochester. I thought that was where I was going to stay for a while. And then ultimately, my goal at that time, we all have pipe dreams. I wanted to eventually own a radio station. But then the job in Rochester to do hockey games became available. And I sent them a tape. I didn't think it was a very good audition tape.
Yeah.
But okay, do 3 games, do them on the road.
Yeah.
We'll see how it works out. And here we are, some 50 years later.
Here we are. You're in the hall. You're in the Hall of Fame, and you're calling it quits after 44 years. It's pretty good. Was hockey in your blood growing up? Because it was for me. I don't know if you know this about me. I grew up in New York. I was a huge Ranger fan. My dad took me to Ranger games from 8 years old until I went to college, which was really interesting when we went back there in 2014, where I'm going back to literally where I grew up as the enemy, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But was hockey in your blood, or just that Rochester hockey job came up, or it could have been baseball, it could have been anything, right?
Yeah, as a kid, I played a lot of sports. I loved it.
Yeah.
hockey in the winter, baseball in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, growing up in the Northeast, cold winter nights, there were backyard rinks I could play on.
Yeah.
We used to go down to the quarry near our house. Actually, on a full moon, we'd cut a hole in the ice, flood it, so we'd have a nice clean sheet the next day.
Wow.
But I loved to play at both sports.
Yeah.
And because my dad was in radio, he had access to get comp tickets to the Rochester American games when we were kids.
Ah.
And I would go with my dad when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old,
Yeah.
maybe 8 or 10 times a year. And then when I got into high school, I was able to get the tickets through my dad's radio station. And me and my buddies would go. We'd go almost, every weekend, if not once, twice, because the Rochester Americans home games were traditionally and still are on Fridays and Sundays.
Really interesting.
So it worked out great for the weekend. And
Sure.
I was a huge fan. And my wife of 47 years, Carolyn, some of our dates were to hockey games because I loved it. And she grew up in a sports family. And so very fortunate that it worked out the way it did.
Well, who is your pro team? Like because I don't know, Buffalo, the Sabres.
Yeah, no, Buffalo wasn't there.
No, they
when
weren't
I was
there
a
yet.
kid, and I told this story at the Hall of Fame 10 years ago now. But the good thing about it, living in the Northeast, is at night you can, play with your transistor radio and get all these radio stations from Chicago and Boston and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and New York.
Right.
So I could listen to the Boston Bruins games on WBZ. Bob Wilson was doing the games. I could listen to Dan Kelly doing games in St. Louis on KMOX, a 50,000 watt powerhouse. Bruce Martin in Detroit on WJR.
Mm-hmm.
So, not only could I play the sport as a kid, but because I was, I grew up in that radio household, so to speak. When I got my radio, I'd put the earplug in at night, lie in bed, and try and find a game and listen to the Blackhawks or the Bruins. So, yeah.
Do you feel like your style was a combination of those guys you just mentioned, or?
Yeah, probably. The one guy I admired the most, my dad had a big booming voice, much more so than mine, if you can believe that. But Bob Wilson had the deep baritone voice with the Boston Bruins. Here's Orr behind the net, off to Esposito, and when you're young and you're thinking of being a broadcaster, you want to sound like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's different today. Now you just have to have a personality. You could, be coughing every 10 minutes. Nobody cares. But probably he's the one guy.
Yeah.
He's the one guy that in the back of my mind, when I started, especially, I was probably trying to emulate. But then as you get the experience, as we all know, you develop your own style, your own cadence. I'm sure it was for you when you took pictures, Andy.
Yeah.
Okay, I've done this 10, 12 years. I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
It puts your stamp on your work, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's no different for a broadcaster.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I learned from the greats, Neil Leifer, John Zimmerman, all those guys who set the table. But I wanted to, like you said, put my own stamp on it. And I hope I did. I don't know. It remains to be seen. So a couple of things about what you do for a living, kind of similar to what I did and still do. I hope I can still go out there and shoot every once in a while. But especially with hockey, Nick, you got to be like a millisecond ahead of what's going on, because by the time you say what's going on, 2 other things have happened already. Like, I'm the same way. Like, shooting hockey is really the most challenging sport for me of every sport, and I've probably shot every sport known to man. The most difficult sport to shoot, to anticipate, to be ahead of the action, right? And then on top of that, you got to memorize names of like foreign players, which is a whole other thing. But is that something innate, or did you teach yourself that, or how did that come about?
Again, I think, I'll go back to one of my first games that I did for the Ithaca College hockey team. They didn't have a rink on campus. We had to use Cornell's line a rink.
Yeah.
So me and my buddy took the remote equipment over. And back then there was no internet. You had very little information on the team coming in.
Yeah.
So we couldn't study the names, the numbers. stuff that I still do to this day. That's my priority, is who's playing for that team, right? And I remember the puck dropped to start that game. And by the time I figured out who the faceoff was won to, the puck had moved 3 or 4 times to different players. So that was my wake-up call. Okay, how do I go about this to
Yeah.
make it sound good? Okay, I've got to know who's on the ice.
Yeah.
So, and I tell that to young aspiring broadcasters, and have for years in our sport, especially. And Andy, you're right. Not only shooting a hockey game because of the spontaneity of it, but calling a game because of that. And everybody plays. They're changing as the game is going. No whistles, and you could go through everybody that's dressed for the game.
Yeah.
So you've got to know. You've got to figure it out. So I learned very early on that to have a chance to be good at this, you need to know who the players are.
Right.
And of course, over the years, you learn tricks like Arizona. A few years ago, a guy, Nick Schmaltz, wears number 8. Clayton Keller wears number 9. Well, the way they're uniformed, sometimes is that an 8 or is it a 9?
Yeah.
Okay, Schmaltz is a right shot, Keller's a left. So instead of looking at their number, I look at who's shooting left. That's how little tricks like that you pick up with experience.
Yeah. Sure.
And you've got to have that comfort level.
Yeah.
You can't be thinking about what you want to do. It just has to come out.
Yeah.
Because if you think in our sport, especially doing it on radio, which to me, and I'm not blowing smoke for me, but I think it's the most difficult sport to do on radio, is hockey.
Yeah.
Because the viewer doesn't see it, and it's moving so quickly with different players all the time. You want to give them a sense of where the player is, where the puck is, and what's happening. So, you've just got to be aware of everything and be prepared. Be prepared. I mean, I still put in the same work for playoff game number 1 coming up in a few days that I did 50 years ago.
Yeah. Look,
you have to do it.
No, I've been in the booth.
You can't cheat. You can't cheat.
No, I've seen your prep sheet. I mean, it's it's like hieroglyphics to me. I mean, I can't. But it's. I used to marvel at Chick Hearn. Chick used to have different pen colors and all that stuff, and he just knew what everything was. Yeah, unbelievable. I want to talk about the early career with the Kings. 81, you came to the Kings, and I saw a video. I watched the game on TV the night they honored you the other night, and there was the most hilarious interview of you and Dave Taylor. With Dave Taylor. Just take me back to that early, like maybe that first season, and because the Kings were an interesting organization back then, to say the least.
Yeah, it was interesting in a lot of different ways. I came in 81, and they hadn't had a lot of success.
Yeah.
The team was born in 1967. So 14 years before I came.
Yeah.
The bulk of the games were radio only, as they were with the Lakers and the Dodgers. And this is before cable TV came on board. And now, of course, every game is televised in every sport. So it was different back then than it is now from that regard. The Kings, I don't know. They just had trouble figuring out the right way to get a good team on the ice.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it all changed in 88 when Gretzky came.
Right.
But
no, but tell me about that interview with Dave, though, because Dave looked like first of all, he looked like a deer in the headlights. Like he had never talked to anybody with a microphone before.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Andy.
Yeah.
When you first saw it.
Yeah.
Did we get you hooked?
Yeah, oh, for sure. It was awesome. It was like
Bob Borgen used to produce our features.
I remember Bob. I love Bob. Yeah.
And Dave was still playing, and I think we did this interview in the late 80s.
Right.
And I had been in LA for like 7-8 years. And the premise of the interview, it's the lost. We found this interview that Nick did with Dave Taylor when Dave was a rookie.
Yeah.
And Dave's rookie year, I think, was 1977. So we had, I'll never forget this. We filmed the piece at the Culver City ice rink where the Kings used to practice all the time.
Yep.
And they brought in the makeup people from the Roseanne show, and they put the mullets on Dave and myself and the mustaches. Not that we didn't have those back in the day. We both did. And Bob Morgan said, well, here are a series of questions we want to have you ask Dave, as if I'm a rookie reporter.
Right.
And I'm trying to act nervous during the interview and Dave, and I ask him all these questions that we already knew the answer to, because it's not a 1977 interview. It's being done 13, 14 years later.
It was hilarious.
And it's interesting.
Yeah.
Andy, we played most of that interview on a pregame show a couple of weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to put her on the spot. Well, them on the spot.
Yeah.
But the host of the pregame show, Carlin Bathe and Jarrett Stoll, former Kings player, actually thought it was an actual real interview. And Dave predicted all of these things that happened.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, you guys had so much fun.
We were on the plane. Carlin was on the plane like 3 days later. He said, no, Carlin, that's not a real, get out. So, hook, line, and sinker.
I love it. I love it.
We reeled in a couple more.
That's so great, Nick. That's so great, Nick. So, Nick, I mean, there were some lean years with the Kings. You and I both experienced it. But there were some great players during those lean years. I mean, Marcel Dion, of course, and then when Wayne came in '88, like you said, everything changed. But the young Luc Robitaille, who didn't speak any English, right? Look where he's gotten. And then, of course, the core group that from both Stanley Cup runs, of Kopi, Brown, Doughty, and Quick, those guys. I mean, all four of those numbers got to go up in the rafters, right?
Sure.
But the thing that sticks with me the most, honestly, Nick, are the fans. I mean, I have to tell you, when I started at Art Center, I was 19, and we were given an assignment to do like an annual report, and I was a sports photographer, which they hated the fact that I didn't want to do corporate work. And I contacted every professional team in LA and all the colleges. Nobody would let me in to do this like behind the scenes thing except for the Kings, right? And so I went in there as this young whippersnapper student, and I met these people who used to sit behind me, in that corner near the Zamboni tunnel at the Forum, the same people every single game. And then I became a professional. And then fast forward to 2012, and I'm standing on the ice. It was the greatest, literally the greatest moment in my career. I'm standing on home ice while Dustin Brown is lifting the Stanley Cup, which I never, honestly, I don't know if you did, ever thought I'd see that in my lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And
right,
I literally see those same people behind the bench, and the guy's holding a sign, "Now I can die."
Yeah.
But
it's interesting, Andy, because for years, Bob Miller and I and our longtime trainer Pete Demers, whom we'd get on the plane year after year after a loss on the road, look at each other and shake our heads and go, we're never going to see it, are we? We're never going to see it.
Yeah.
Well, for Bob and myself, it was 30 plus years, and we did see it finally in 2012, which it came right out of the blue. I mean, they barely made the playoffs as the 8th seed that year.
Unbelievable.
And then they just ran roughshod through everything. Up 3-0 in all four series.
I know Quickie was like out of his mind. I mean, I've never seen a goalie play like that.
And nobody, Andy, has come close to those numbers in the postseason since Jonathan Quick. I mean, the save percentage, the goals against. He started 20 games. He allowed 2 goals or fewer in 18 of those 20. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was so great to watch night after night.
Unbelievable. I mean, I can't even imagine what it was like for you. And like myself, you had to work. You had to do your job in that moment. Same thing with when Kirk Gibson hit the home run. I can't be watching the ball. I mean, I have to be like on the ball. And I literally was the first one at home plate when Kirk came across and touched home plate and he high-fived Oral Hershiser. That was me next to him, So, but it's such an interesting thing because you can't not be a fan of the team that you're around, 9-10 months of the year, right? And what a moment that must have been.
Yeah, and people ask me, well, how did you react when they won the cup? I'm on the air, and not only did I have to call the game as it wound down the final 10 seconds, but I've got to do a post-game show.
Right.
I've got to do a talk show.
Yeah.
So I've got to stay within my realm here. I've got
Sure.
a job to do here.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate. I was able to get on the ice about an hour after the game ended and take in some of that excitement. But
did you get to lift the cup? Did you lift the cup? Did I get a picture
not
of you?
that night.
Okay.
Not that night.
All right.
But a lot of us were very fortunate during that summer. We had some time,
Right.
half a day with the cup, and we invited people, and they took their picture with it. And that's one of the greatest memories I'll ever have, Andy, is seeing season seat holders and Kings fans get their picture with the Stanley Cup.
Oh,
I mean, the look on their face.
Yeah.
I mean, the utter joy and glee, like the rest of us. We've waited so long.
Yeah.
45 years. And it's meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me then. It still does, because I'm them, right? I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I felt the same way they did when we finally did win.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes,
I mean,
special moment.
I covered 40 NBA finals. The Lakers won, I don't know how many in that period. And I was at every one of them, and they were wonderful. They were great, and I felt part of it. But there was something special about that 2012 Cup, and I wish my dad had been there to share that, because he went to a lot of Kings games when he came to visit. And I just felt I felt his presence there in the building, which was really a beautiful thing. And so much that you witnessed in Kings history. I mean, the miracle in Manchester, I was there for that too. But what a moment that was with your colleague Darrell Evans. Is there a player or two that that stood out over this incredible career that you've had, like a Tiger Williams or some player that just kind of came out of nowhere that, wow, either I became friends with, or a memory that you might have?
Some of my favorites to watch over the years, Dave Taylor is in that group. He was playing when I started. Then he transitioned into the front office, was Kings GM, and he's still at games. He's still scouting. He's working for the St. Louis Blues. So I've known Dave for 44 years, since I came to LA. So special person, great human being, was a wonderful player. Played every game like it was game 7 of the playoffs. Could have been a preseason game, regular season game. He was a treat to watch night after night.
Tough as nails, that guy.
Yeah. And and then the Triple Crown line with Deion Taylor and Simmer. They were fun to watch. Bernie Nichols. And I mentioned Dave Taylor. I've known Jim Fox and Darrell Evans, two broadcasters, for a long time with the Kings.
Sure.
Since my first year, they were both players. They both broke in. They were both members of the 1980 draft, Kings draft picks. So I've known both of them and worked with both of them for years, over 40 years. So they're in a special category. Larry Robinson is still one of my, he only played 3 years with the Kings, coached 4 years with the Kings after he retired. He's one of my favorite people of all time. Just a lot of fun to be around. You never know that he is one of the greatest players in the history of the game. He's just a regular guy when you talk to him, which I appreciate. The Gretzky years were fabulous. The Fab Four you mentioned that won those cups. And all the supporting. Alec Martinez just announced he's going to retire. He's blocked too many shots, apparently, and he blocked a ton when the Kings won their cups in 2012 and 14. And of course, everybody's going to remember Alec in Kings history because he got the overtime goal to get us to the final in 2014
in Arizona, right?
And won it.
Yes, that's right.
And won it against your Rangers.
That triple overtime game was crazy. That was. I had to put all that loyalty aside. But unbelievable! Wow. So Nick, you're now mentioned. Not now. I shouldn't say now. You are mentioned in the same breath with the legacy of the great voices in Los Angeles. I mean, Chick Hearn, Vin Scully, Jaime Jarrín, Ralph Lawler, your former partner Bob Miller, of course. You're part of that Mount Rushmore. I mean, I know you'd be a humble guy, but I mean, do you take that in? I mean, in 2015, when you got inducted in the Hall of Fame, and you're still working, right? I mean, you still
Yeah,
worked another
yeah,
10 years. Did you take that in at that moment that, I'm part of this legacy in LA?
yeah. I think when I went into the Hall of Fame, that was special, and that was 10 years ago, 2015.
Yeah.
Special because I was inducted by my colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
my fellow broadcasters. They
Ah,
thought highly enough of me to, number one, consider me,
yeah.
and then you know nominate me for that year's Foster Hewitt Award. So
Mm.
that was special for my career. And over probably the last 2 or 3 seasons, with the games I've done, the years I've done, stories the last couple of weeks that people for the all the different journals have written. They've lumped me in with those group of individuals you
Yeah.
just did,
Right.
and obviously, I didn't ask for that,
Hmm.
but I'm honored. I mean, anytime you could be mentioned in a group such as the one that you just
Hmm.
talked about, uh, it is special. I mean,
Hmm.
I'd like to think that my body of work has spoken for itself,
Hmm.
and I'd like to think that the way I presented the game made it enjoyable for Kings fans.
Hmm.
Uh, I know I put in the work, and it's nice that you get rewarded for it in the long run. But yeah, I mean, it is. And maybe it'll sink in a bit more after I do actually retire after this playoff season.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, we can
yeah,
commiserate on that, my friend, because
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah, it is like a grieving period, I got to say. But it also, you're leaving on your own volition, which is wonderful. Like I did, of course, and you're prioritizing family, which is also wonderful, and you want to travel and all the things you want to do. I certainly hope that you got a couple of months left in you, and
yep,
you walk
yep,
off with another ring on your finger. How are
yeah,
you
yeah.
feeling? How are you feeling about this year's Kings team? They came on
Well,
so
it's interesting.
strong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had some doubts. I did
Mm-hmm.
at the start. Last year we had 99 points,
Mm-hmm.
got bumped out in the first round by Edmonton for the third straight year.
Yeah. And we got them
They brought
again.
in, yeah,
Yeah.
they brought in some new players. We didn't know how they would fit in,
Yeah.
but as it's turned out, all of the moves that Rob Blake has made, and he should be considered for GM of the year. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all of the people he has brought in, including the most recent Kuzmenko at the trade
Yeah.
deadline,
Yeah.
which is kind of energized the Kopitar Kempe unit because
Mm-hmm.
Kuzmenko plays with them. It's
Mm-hmm.
energized the power play. So now you're going in. Darcy Kemper is going to be considered for the Vezina Trophy, best goaltender.
Yeah.
Probably won't win it, but he'll get consideration. He had that good of a season,
Mm-hmm.
one of the best ever in franchise history.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden you've got home ice.
Yeah.
They had the best home ice in the league, home ice record. Start with Edmonton. You grab the first 2 games at home. Okay, maybe we can get through this. And now, as we all know, longtime Kings fans know the scenario here.
Yep.
You get in, you get past that first round, you get some momentum, and anything can happen. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel more confident this year, Andy, than I have in the previous 3 years entering the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good team. It's a good team,
Yeah.
good young players, solid veterans, solid goaltending. They just have to figure out a way to beat our arch nemesis, has been for years, the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, but we see that in sports a lot, and that's what makes it great. I mean, that's what makes the rivalries great, I think, and the fact that we drew Edmonton in the first round, I think it was for a reason because we can kick their butt this year.
There you go. There you go.
Well, Nick, it's going to be tough to fill that chair in the booth. Once you walk away. I know Kings fans are going to miss you a lot. They'll still see you around. You're still going to come to games.
Absolutely.
And, I'm going to miss seeing you around. I haven't been around this season. I just couldn't do it because of my back thing. But hopefully, maybe we'll take a game together down the road.
There you go. There you go.
But
I'll buy the popcorn if you buy the beer.
There you go. It's about the same price at Crypto.com Arena now. But Nick, I got to tell you that you've been such a friendly person to be around my whole career. I go back to the beginning, and you've always stopped and said hello, and we chat for a minute or two, whatever. And to be able to sit down with you now for half an hour and chat about your incredible career is really a gift to me. So thank you very much, my friend.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Andy. And, I'm asked what I'll miss the most. Doing the games, I still love doing them. And I'll miss the people I've met over 50 years of doing hockey, and including people like yourself that are regulars, we know you're a Kings fan, and we appreciate everything that you've done for the organization and organizations here in Southern California. But I'll still be at games. I'll still see a lot of the people that I want to see. Don't write me off just yet.
No, and you won't have the pressure of remembering names.
There you go. Now watch. Next time I see you, I'll probably say, "Who are you?
Who are you?" Hey, Nick, so great to catch up, and really congratulations on an amazing career. Like I said, I hope you got a couple of good months in you right now. Saving the best for last. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Great. Thanks a lot, Andy.
Okay, buddy. Thank you so much. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation with the legendary Nick Nickson. I hope you all did too. Also hoping Nick has a bunch of Kings playoff games ahead of him before he hangs up the mic and walks away from the broadcast booth. A third Stanley Cup ring would be nice for both of us. Thanks for tuning into this episode and for continuing to support the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm. Please follow them on Instagram at FujifilmX_US. That's at FujifilmX_US. Folks, please tell all your friends to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Legends of Sport, and of course our Instagram at Legends of Sport, and my photography can be found on Instagram at ADBPhotoInc. Thanks as always to our producer Carlin Barker and our editors Sean Gosser and Addison Shao. Thanks a lot to Rob Koch from the LA Kings for helping get Nick on this podcast today. Thanks again, everyone, for checking out this episode. We'll be back next week with another great episode on the Legends of Sport podcast presented by Fujifilm.